Welcome to the Agape Podcast. I'm Beck, a passionate, sold-out lover of Jesus who accidentally started a Christian singles ministry, and now I want to help as many people as possible to find their husband or wife while being super healthy and full of hope. So get ready for some real, raw talk about all things singleness and dating. Joined by my amazing husband, Nicholas, and okay, we call him Nick.
She might not think I'm too amazing right now.
No.
We were having we'll call it a discussion.
A lover's spat just before we started doing this. Because today we actually want to talk about the realities of being married and what it's like being, 6 weeks in now? Was 6 weeks?
6 weeks in.
6 weeks and change.
4.5 months into our relationship.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't sound too enthused about that, but I am. I love her.
He's trying to make it up because we've been fighting.
So expectations in marriage. And
you're just diving straight in. We're not even like warming up or anything. No. Okay, well let's just say like, so yeah, we we definitely have had a really steep learning curve with being married. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think we were really naive.
We're so dumb.
And we just thought,
like, this is gonna be so easy.
Hey,
we heard the word of the Lord.
Yeah, and we're super awesome friends. That means we're gonna be super awesome in marriage.
And we won't have to try that hard.
Right. Turns out we have to try a whole lot harder.
It's actually pretty hard work. It's great and super worth it, but it's a lot harder than being single. But it's super stretchy as well.
There's a lot of ways where we're different, and there's a lot of ways we're very alike. Mm-hmm. One of the ways we're very alike is we're very opinionated, and we don't like to be wrong.
No, our wanting to be right has not served us well in the past. And it was really great when we were friends because we're super competitive, and we would have game night and be like, "No, I win! No, I win!" Yeah, that doesn't translate super well in relationships because
doesn't translate super well into conversation, and if there's conflict in the conversation.
Like, no, you actually said this. No, what I really said was this. No, you're remembering it wrong. We've had a lot of those.
We're learning how to fight for connection rather than fighting
to be right.
Beck loves to finish my sentences.
Yeah, because I knew what you were going to say. See, I was right with that. Case in point, guys. Case in point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some of the things that I think we have found more challenging. We'll start with challenging and we'll end with the good stuff because it's way more good than bad. Way more, not even bad, just challenging. Like, everyone says having a kid is challenging, getting married is challenging, and it's so worth it. So I definitely want people to have hope, but we want to give you guys a really real, raw take on like what marriage has been like for us in the last 6 weeks, because it has definitely been like way more challenging, way more stretching than I thought it would be. I thought it was just going to be like, hey, we're married, we're best friends, like skipping off into the sunset. But like even our engagement was super tough. We got engaged 12 days after we started dating. We went from being like best friends for a couple months to like dating to engaged 12 days later. And then we're going to tell the whole story in another podcast. But engagement season was really rough. And pretty much everyone that I speak to is like, yeah, it's a really tough season. And that's not to scare anyone. It's just to kind of prepare you that, hey, if you're having a hard time in engagement, it's okay. It's like super normal. Somebody described it to us like, it's like you have all the responsibility and none of the fun of marriage yet. And we had, like, I'm a pretty chill person in general, but we were pretty stressed, especially you. Hey, honey.
So in the span of basically a month, I started a new job, moved into a new place, and got married. So I think out of like the 5 or 6 most stressful things you can do, I did 3 of them in a month.
Yeah.
So I was just pretty stressed out with all of this new stuff, new bills, new responsibilities at a job.
Taking care of somebody now who
taking
can't
care,
work in the country.
Right, taking care of somebody that can't work.
Yeah. I mean, we weren't married yet, but you were still like, hey, I'm paying rent and that's going to be my responsibility. And so that brought in a whole other kit and caboodle of like problems. And if you can hear that, he's drinking some water. I don't know if you can hear the...
Yeah, I mean, so going from, both of us kind of went from this, but you're going to where you're living with a bunch of roommates and rent's very affordable to, hey, we're furnishing and we're getting our own place and everything is on, me. There have been days where I didn't feel good and Bex told me, stay home from work, and I'm like, I can't. I have to go.
Yeah.
If I don't, I don't make money. I don't get paid. We don't, we potentially don't, make rent, or a bill doesn't get paid on time.
Yeah.
Which is really important for me.
Yeah. And that was when even when we were like engaged, that wasn't even. And then we had a wedding to pay for as well. On top of that, and then just really practicals. Like we planned this wedding in a month, basically. Like from when we set the date to when we got married. It was a month, and so I had an idea of kind of the things I wanted, and it wasn't hard. But then the execution, obviously, the great thing was I delegated to like every friend that we had. They're like, "Hey, can we help?" I'm like, "Absolutely. Can you do this, this, and this?" So leading up, like 3 or 4 days before the wedding, I was like super peaceful, super calm. My bridesmaid said that she's never seen a bride more calm. I was really chill because we delegated so well. But before that, we had some really crazy disagreements and we were just like butting heads all the time, and we just had to keep coming back to, okay, we know that this is just because we're stressed. It's just because we've got a lot on our plate. Then there's like green card stuff and like legal stuff that we had to do and get marriage licenses, and all this other stuff is just like piling on, and then making sure our hearts are right, and etc. And so we've spoken to multiple couples recently who are engaged and they're experiencing the same thing. It's not uncommon for the season. It's one of the biggest stresses, and even for someone as chill as
I think
us, it's still big.
I think that it's important to know that like we watch movies and we hear people talk about how great their engagement was 10 years into marriage. We don't maybe we don't hear it a month and a half into marriage. But, or we watch these movies where the engagement's just awesome, and so we come in with this preconceived notion of, hey, this time is just going to be rainbows and butterflies and super magical all the time, and everything's just going to be perfect. And and in reality, like, a lot of times it's not the case.
Yeah.
We, don't get me wrong, like there were some amazing times that we had in our engagement, and dreaming and talking about things and how it would look. Like we had a lot of fun doing that, and even like the day of was fantastic. But like I just say that to say, like, it's okay to have a little bit of conflict.
Oh yeah,
it's okay to have difference of opinion. It's okay to be stressed. What's not okay is to live there.
Yeah. And like when you're having to make these big decisions about your life, and you're like, well, we're not even married yet, and people are like, so come up, like our premarital was like, come up with a family budget, like what kind of contraception are you going to use, what country are you going to live in, like all these big questions that you're like, oh, it's getting real. It's not just about like the fairy tale, oh, I love you so much. It's like, no, there's like practicals that we have to go through. Now, not everyone's going to get, married and within like 4 months, 3.5 months of starting to date. So, but even people that we know have had a longer engagement are still like, this is still going to be a process. Ours was just more like in a pressure cooker of like, hey, here's everything at once. And that was a timing that we felt was right. That was a timing that we felt the Lord was saying. And I'll talk more about this in another podcast, but another episode. But I actually received a word in October that I'd be married within 6 months from my pastor. And I was married within 5.5 months. And so we knew the timing was right, but just because we had that word, I almost feel like God had to give us that word to be like, hey, it's okay. It's going to be rough, but like you guys are great and you can get through it. And so I think the biggest thing during that season was actually like choice. Like we had to continue to choose each other when like we didn't feel like it. Like I'm like, you know, you always see these things like in engagement, oh, they're so in love. I'm like, yeah, I felt in love a lot of the time, but there was sometimes and even leading up to our wedding and even a couple of days before, I was like, ooh, I'm choosing Nick. Like I know he's my husband. I know he's incredible. I don't feel it right now. Anxiety brought out the worst in us.
I think that goes into Chris Valentin says that if you fall in love, you can fall out of love just as quick, and so you have to be willing to choose love. And so, yeah, there were a few times where that got tested. There were a few times where I'm sure we questioned like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, is this the right person? This is nuts.
You know, but it was, hey, like, I've chosen this person. Beck played, I mean, like, it can't, I mean, this is a funny story and we won't completely go into it, but Beck played a really bad practical joke.
Oh, I was like, where is this going?
It was really good, but it was, I mean, it was hard.
It was really good. It was super funny, and everyone else thought it was great.
But in it, like, I had to choose her. Like,
I told him a lie that probably would have changed his willingness to want to marry me if it had have been true. And so I actually got to see him really step up and be like, hey, if this is true, like, I love you and I choose you. And like, I was mucking around, and then he like believed me, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll just kind of keep going with it and see how it goes. And then by the end, he's like, he was having a hard time though. So I was like, oh no, like, I'm just kidding. Like, sorry. But just seeing him choose me, even like, hey, if this was real, I would still choose you. I was like, what? That was crazy.
I mean, but I thought it was real.
Yeah.
And I chose her. And to be honest, it would have been really easy in that moment to go, hey, I didn't sign up for this. I'm out.
Yep.
Like you didn't disclose this. You didn't divulge this early on. Sorry, I'm out.
Yeah.
And to be honest, probably nobody would have faulted me for it.
No, everyone would have been like, hey, totally understand, man.
Yeah. But like that's the choice of love, you know.
Yeah. Can I just say on that too, just before that, he'd played a really mean practical joke on his mum, and she was like almost in tears, and I was like, I gotta get him back.
Yeah. So, and I think for me, just going into marriage is, I'm sure we'll get into it at some point if I'm on these podcasts at all.
Oh, you will be.
This is my second marriage. I was married once before, and I think going in, I thought I'm completely healed from my last marriage. I've spent quite a bit of time, seeking the Lord, going after healing, going through counseling.
Being really relentless with that, yeah.
Yeah, being really relentless on healing my heart and getting to a healthy place. But marriage has brought up wounds that I didn't know were there because I hadn't been in a relationship. And so, like, that was something that was completely unexpected. And then bringing her into that process of like, hey, this doesn't really have anything to do with you. Like, this is coming from my last marriage. And having to be in that and apologize if I'm short with her, if I'm short with Beck, or if something like that, and having to go to God, talk to some good guys, and then come back to her and just be like, yeah, I'm sorry, this really didn't have anything to do with you. Here's what's going on, and then trusting her with it. Like, we have to be willing to trust each other with our pain. It's funny, like in dating, or even before dating, when we were just friends, it was super easy to hang out. And when we hung out, like we just talked about everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, like anything under the sun, we would just talk about. And
mainly I would talk and you would listen. You were such a good listener, but
Yeah.
you were a bit chatty too.
yeah, but now it's almost. I think sometimes we find it a struggle to do it.
We get out of friendship mode and we go into like married or work mode.
Right, or we just go into a little bit of complacency.
Yeah.
Like, you're always around. So
That's
So
true.
you know what's going on with me.
Yeah, I don't have to try so hard.
You know, like one of the things we would do is just go for walks and just walk and talk when we were friends. And like we do that, like we still do it, but we do it a lot less now. And I think it's just a point of complacency and busyness. Like, oh no, I'm just too busy. You know, like when she wants to do it, I might be too busy. When I want to do it, she might be too busy. And so it seems like sometimes in marriage, you don't make time for the other person.
Yeah.
You want them to work into your schedule. And so one of the things we're learning is like, hey, like, how does your schedule and my schedule become our schedule?
Yeah, that's super.
And what are the things? What are our non-negotiables, and what are the things that we're willing to sacrifice? Because some of my non-negotiables are going to come up on things that she can sacrifice, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Some of her non-negotiables are going to come up on things that I can sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah. And some things I've even said like, okay, Nick, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this to you? Like, how passionate are you about it? And he'll be like, oh, I'm like a... Actually, I remember you didn't even answer me. Like, I'm really passionate about this. I was like, no, I need a number. And you were like, oh, I'm like a 9 on this. I'm like, cool. I'm like a 4. I don't care that much about it. So I'm willing to defer to you. And let's do what you want on this because it's not that big of an issue for me. And so like melding our lives has been super interesting because we have such different values. We have different values around cleanliness. We have different values around like where things should go in the house. We have different values on how we spend our time. Like I want to be out and go and like do stuff quite often, and you really value being together. And I value being together too, but I'm like, oh, friends, this, that. I will overcommit myself and do so much because I'm so go, and I have a vision. I want to work so much. And you're like, hey, I want to be with you. Like, let's be present. Let's not do this. Let's not, And so it's like, oh, okay, I actually have to prioritize somebody else into my life. It's not just the Beck show anymore. It's not just what I want to do. And then, having you be sick, Nick has been a little bit unwell overnight, especially not sleeping super well, and actually being like, oh, I'm up with him, looking after him, waiting on him. Hey, do you need this? Do you need that? Cleaning up things. Just that has brought up a whole other realm as well of like being married that I was not expecting. I thought it'd be like, honestly, just like sex and fun. It's been super fun too, but it's a lot more real. It's a lot more like, oh, it's like a family member who I love and I get to share a bed with, you get to have lots of fun with, but we actually do life together. We have to figure out how to spend finances. Like we value different things in our finances as well. And so now we have joint finances and we're like, oh, like, should we let each other know when we make a purchase? Like, is this okay? Do you mind if I get this extra treat or whatever? Like we're having to talk about it. Just to make sure we're on the same page. For us, we actually decided, you know what? We're going to overshare and over ask and talk more than what we probably should. So that we have a really good precedent of like faith and trust in one another, so that later, we don't have to talk about little purchases, but for the beginning, we're just going to do that to build trust in that area. And so like, yeah, there's a lot of these things to like navigate through that I just was not expecting. And then also I think the biggest thing was I thought when we got married, like when we're at the altar standing there holding hands, you're looking into my eyes, I'm looking into yours, I'm like, oh, I'm so in love. I would feel like a cosmic shift, like we were like one flesh, like something in our spirit would unite. I would feel like Nick is my husband. But it really is taken, like it's 6 weeks in and I'm like, oh, I'm warming up to the idea. But even like a month after, I was like, oh, I don't feel like I'm married. Like I know I am, I'm wearing the ring, I've signed the papers, we did the thing, we did the ceremony. But so, like, it hasn't quite clicked yet. Like, there wasn't this big shift where I'm like, ooh, our hearts have completely aligned. And I've spoken to a few newly married couples, and they're like, yeah, it was the same for me. Like, it actually took time for us to get used to being married, to get used to saying my husband. Like, for me, I'm still like, whoa, I have a husband. What is that? I wake up next to him and I'm like, you didn't see this before, but you were sleeping today, and I just watched you for a bit, and I was like, oh, and then like kind of stroked your face, but you like without you feeling it.
It's a bit of a creeper moment.
I was like, oh, he's mine. No, and like I was like, whoa, it still hasn't hit me yet, and so that was one thing that I really expected to just click into place, and really just feel, and it's been more of a growing process, a learning process, an adjustment process. And like we said, it's real. Like, we just had a disagreement about doing this podcast. And we had to choose connection. We had to choose to go low. We had to choose to apologize. But it's like, oh, you grow so much as a person. You grow in your like communication skills. You know, think about it like having a best friend. Like, say if you're a girl, you have a girl best friend, but you're with them all the time. And they want to spend time with you. And it's like, oh, and they're always there as well. And so if you've ever spent like an excessive amount of time with like a best friend, and you know that even though you love each other and you get along super well, you're like, hey, sometimes we just are going to butt heads and conflict is going to come up because we're just spending so much time together. That's kind of like what we've been experiencing. But I feel like every time we kind of work through something, we get a little bit, we get more ground, we get more breakthrough. And the other really cool thing is, in marriage, that's different to dating. Like, even in dating, we were like this because of our dynamic, but especially in dating, there's not like this stress if we have a disagreement. Like, I know we are going to work it out. I know we have to work it out.
Yeah, we
there's no other option.
Yeah.
It's not like we're going to like, you know, break up or like get divorced, or, you know, it's not like, you know, when you're dating, there's always that option of, hey, I could just leave. If this ever gets too much, too bad, it's not the person that I want, or the person that I choose, I can just be like, hey, peace out, I'm done. In marriage, I'm like, oh, we are gonna work this thing out. And so we might take a moment, we might take some time. It's more like, I remember what somebody said this when we were friends, you guys bicker like an old married couple, like, and then somebody else said, oh, you guys are like brother and sister. And I feel like the way we disagree is like brother and sister. Like, we'll be like, oh, you're so annoying, we'll be a little annoyed. But then we'll come back and be like, hey, bro, like, or like, oh, I don't call you bro, but I'm like, hey, baby, like, do you want something to eat? And you're like, yeah, you know, or like, hey, can you do this? Or do you want to play a game? And then we're like all good again. That's kind of how I would probably describe it best. Do you have anything to add on that, babe? I've been monologuing for a bit.
I would just say that, like, love and marriage looks like sacrifice. I think that we went in thinking that, oh, like, this person will just do everything that I want to do because they love me and we hang out so well together.
Yeah.
But, like, we didn't hang out, like, we hung out a lot. We didn't hang out every day.
No, not like
day,
this.
You know?
We thought we hung out a lot.
Yeah, she, you know, even today, she's like, you're a much bigger nerd than I thought you were. You know, like
yeah.
I'm going through the Clone Wars series, and it's a cartoon series, and I'm loving it. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah, this is great. And I'm telling her all about it and what's going on and where
you're like this lumberjack who like loves like Star Wars, D&D, like all this stuff that I just didn't really, like, I kind of knew it, but guys, there are layers to the thing. Like, it just keeps like an onion. You just keep showing me this like nerd culture stuff that you love.
I'll convert her eventually.
I do love Star Wars though, just I've never watched the cartoons.
Yeah, and so, you know, it's sacrifice. Like, no, it's getting to be my bedtime, and I want to like just kind of chill out and then go to bed because I gotta be up early to go to work, and Beck wants to do a podcast, and I'm like, oh, and she's like, you said we'd do it today, and I'm like,
to be fair, it was like 9:30, guys. We usually go to bed pretty late. We usually go to bed at like 11:30, 12.
But my work schedule has changed.
Okay. See, there's a little bit that... Here we go. This is just a little
Yeah.
taster to what was happening earlier. So anyway, the point of the story.
But it's like, okay, yep, let's do this. You know, I don't really want to right now, but love looks like sacrifice, and this is something that's important to her. So, okay, like, let's do it.
Yeah.
And, but I don't think we thought there'd be as much sacrifice as there has been.
Yeah, I think we thought we were more on the same page than we actually are. I think
just maybe that our interests were more in line than what they are.
Yeah.
You know, now to our ignorance,
horror.
Well, to our ignorance, you know, we were in a relationship, and I mean, we're 4 months into a relationship right now.
Yeah, 4.5.
You know,
almost 5. 23rd will be 5. It's now the 18th. Woohoo! Making traction.
We're not necessarily the standard
no.
when it comes to Christian dating and Christian marriage.
But I think also we hear about these whirlwind romances where people get married in like 3 months and everyone's like, wow, it's so incredible. And I'm like, yeah, and the Lord's in it, and like you hear a word, but it doesn't mean that it's super easy. In fact, it probably is harder. Oh, sorry. Nick's just choking on some water. He's got some heartburn, so he's like drinking a fair bit. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, that you hear about all these whirlwind romances and how amazing it was in like such a quick time, but you don't hear about the struggle of like, oh, we actually don't, you know, we haven't dated for that long. We don't know each other that well. We have to wrestle through these big things when we don't have like a super, like we had a foundation in friendship, which is great, because when marriage stuff is hard or we're struggling,
or you know, or sex is hard.
Yeah.
Or
it's not going the way that we want it to.
When intimacy is hard, like we have to rely on our friendship.
Well, it's not even that we rely on it. We just fall back on it really easily.
Yeah.
So we'll be like really struggling with like on a marriage level, like say financially or something. We're like talking about finances, super disagreeing. But then we're like, let's go for a walk, let's go play, and like, hey, do you need anything? And like it's like we revert back to friends, and it makes all the other stuff so much easier. I'm like, I don't know how people who, you know, have relationships or even marriages that are really based heavily on like lust, for instance. If they get married and they're struggling in the area of sex, like I don't know what they would have to fall back on. You know, or if it's not happening the way they thought that it would. I don't know. Like we were really lucky. Every time something didn't quite go our way, or we were having a hard time in a certain area, we had an amazing friendship to fall back on. Because I was like, oh, like I want to go tell Nick about this thing, you know, or I'm like, oh, he's super annoying me, but like, oh, I want to be around him because he's so fun and I love doing things with him, you know, and I still choose him. And so like when they say love is a choice, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember hearing that as a single, and I'm like, oh, whatever, you're just so in love, of course you choose them. And when they were like, nah, there's days where I really don't feel the feelings. I'm like, I remember just being kind of skeptical. I'm like, oh, I guess they don't like fully feel it, but maybe they're like, you know, they feel it enough. No, you have to choose, and it's a great choice. I love the fact that like you sometimes don't feel like you really like me and I'm a but you're still like, baby, I love you, and you'll come back and we'll come back together and we'll fight for connection, because that's what we, you know, what we need. Actually, behind Nick right now is a picture on my I have like a little vision board, and it says, great marriages are built brick by brick, day after day, over a lifetime. And I put that there because I was like, yeah, it feels like we're just building bricks. We're 6 weeks into building bricks. We had an awesome time on our honeymoon. We came back and stuff got really real again. So yeah, I mean, it just hasn't been what I expected. I thought, yeah, it would just be really like fun all the time, which it is fun a lot of the time.
But in the fun, there's hard work.
Yeah. Because it's real.
There's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
You know, but
explain what you mean by that.
You're molding two lives together.
Yeah.
And that's hard work. And even if you know you want to use the brick analogy, laying brick is hard work.
Oh yeah, because you've probably done it.
You know, it's hard work. It's messy. It's dirty. You know, now not every brick is like that, but there are those ones. You know, that it's messy, it's dirty, it's hard, but there's foundation in it.
Yeah, come on.
You know, and when it's messy and it's dirty and it's hard, and maybe we're like, how are we gonna get through this?
Yeah.
That's where we see Jesus the most.
Yeah.
You know, that's where we see Jesus like humble us and go like, hey, you really screwed up here. Like, I've had Jesus tell me a few times, hey, you really screwed up here. Bex had Jesus tell her a few times, hey, you screwed up here.
Yeah.
You need to go repent to your wife. You need to go repent to your husband.
Yeah. And you're really good at that. Nick is amazing at going to the Lord when we have conflict. And then he'll come back to me and be like, hey, this is what this was really about. Or I'm really sorry I didn't love you well. And I'm like, what? Like 5 seconds ago you walked out. I thought this was on. We were about to go like boxing rink. It was like, never would think. He comes back and he is so humble, has such a like tenderness of heart. And he's like, I'm so sorry. Like, I shouldn't have said this. I shouldn't have done this. Like, the Lord revealed this, this, and this to me. Or I've done this to you and I'm so sorry. I'm like floored because the attitude change within like probably like 2-3 minutes is just like crazy when the Lord comes in. And same with me, like sometimes God's like, hey, actually this is you, like you are being selfish in this moment. And I'm like, ooh, it's exposing and it's really uncomfortable. I don't love it. Because I like being like, I feel like when I was single I've had a lot like it didn't bring up stuff in my heart that much because I never had somebody with me that much. But now the Lord uses us, and everyone told me this before marriage, so I should have expected it. But it really does expose like the things in your heart, just like they say kids do. And I think for you, for us, like you expose a lot of my selfishness, like how I want like things my certain way, because I think it's the way that it should be and it's fun. But it never occurred to me that I would marry somebody who has such a different idea about certain things, and then we're like, oh, how do we value both of them and kind of try and find a middle ground. And I think the biggest thing for us has been like what we watch. We really disagree on like TV shows, movies. We have very different standards of what we watch.
I hate British romantic comedies. she absolutely loves them and they drive me insane.
I don't absolutely love them. They're not all I watch, but like for me, my heart is really tender. I won't watch anything with like sex scenes in it, with like really intense like zombies and stuff. Like I've had problems with like fear of death before, and so I have to draw a harder line with that, and that's been more of a source of conflict for us. Oh, this is something else I didn't expect in marriage. So they always say like the man is the head, and I remember a dating coach who was explaining how the man is the head of the household. He's like the covering, and when he how did he word it? When he slips or when he compromises in a way, he actually there's holes in the covering that come in that can actually go down into his family and to his kids. And so I never really understood what that meant. But when we got married, even on our honeymoon, I used to have a fear of death. Not a fear of like actually dying, but like afterlife stuff. What if there's nothing? And the enemy really comes at me with like that fear. And so on our honeymoon, I haven't had this in like 4 or 5 years. On our honeymoon, I just started having panic attacks. I wake up or we're about to go to bed and I'm like, and Nick has to like pray for me and I'm like freaking out. Anyway, so I'm having these things and I don't know why, I don't know how they've started, I don't know how they've been allowed to come into my life. And then babe, do you want to tell your part?
Yeah, it wasn't when we were on our honeymoon, but like one of my favorite shows is The Walking Dead, and I've watched it, since day one. And I was watching it one day, and I don't know, it was just like God talked to me. He's like, "There's a lot of death in this show." I was like, "Yeah, there is." And he just kind of left it there, and I was like, because I was there for the conversation about the spiritual covering too, and I might have been born at night, but it wasn't last night, so I think God had me put 2 and 2 together of like, hey, so you're watching this show that is really it's around death, it's around dying, and not a lot of like hope. And those are the things that like Beck has been struggling with. And I was like, okay, like I just won't watch it anymore. Like if this show is putting holes in the umbrella, so to speak, and
Of
it's
the covering,
of the covering, and it's causing her this anxiety, this fear, then that's something very small that I can lay down. You know, especially if I'm supposed to be Jesus to this woman. If I'm supposed to love her like Jesus loves the church, like this is definitely something that I can lay down in the hopes that she might not have these thoughts, these feelings, this anxiety, this fear. And since I've done that,
have not had it once.
yeah, and it was pretty early on.
Yeah, it was.
When that revelation came.
Yeah, and that, you know, the crazy thing is, Nick just came to me one day and was like, "Hey, I'm not gonna watch The Walking Dead anymore," and I was like, oh, "Okay." I honestly, I knew you said it was one of your favorite shows, but I didn't even know you were watching it anymore. I didn't even know if it was on or whatever, and he just said, yeah, I just heard the Lord speak to me about it, and he shared the revelation. And I just love that he's so open to hearing the Lord and open to like pivoting. Hey, excuse me, now I'm burping. We're both just like, I had some busy drink. We're both just like, you know, open to hearing the voice of the Lord. And I know that if God spoke to me about something that I loved, I'm like, ooh, you know, it might have to be a discussion, but you just straight away were like, okay, I'm not going to be watching it, and I know how much you love it.
Yeah, and I think for me it was, you know, like whether I watch The Walking Dead, you know, or not, you know, it's not necessarily a sin.
No.
But maybe it's a sin of omission, because like, okay, cool, Beck doesn't want to watch it. I'll just watch it when she's like at one of her groups or something that I don't go to, and no harm, no foul.
Mm-hmm.
But then like also on the flip side of that, it's like, what else would I be willing to watch if Beck's not around? And do I even want to open that door? Like, do I even want to give that a temptation? Like, if I'm willing to watch this and just you know, it's fine. I'll just watch it while she's gone. Don't have to even talk about it. You know, like what else?
If you knew I was struggling with it, you mean?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But I knew. I mean, you know.
But see, I've never even struggled with The Walking Dead. It's just like, I know that zombies, for some reason, God has really convicted me on watching zombie movies, so I just knew that was not something that I could do.
But see, like, right, I knew that she struggled with the zombie movie thing, right? It's not a struggle for me, right? So I was like, cool.
Oh, never used to be for me.
Right, so I was like, cool, I'll just watch it when Beck's not around. But, like, I think that, especially for men, maybe that can cause a slippery slope. You know, maybe the next thing is I watch an R-rated movie that maybe it's not just R because there's violence. Maybe it's R because there's nudity or a sex scene. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I watched that, but, you know, it wasn't lustful, it was an accident. And then maybe that slides into, Beck's gone, you know.
I'll watch some porn. Yeah.
You know, and how far down the rabbit trail do we want to go until it's too late? So because I was already having this, like, I'll just watch it, and it's not a big deal. Like, I was like, nope, it's just time to cut that out of my life.
Wow.
Because, like, I'm the spiritual covering. If this is causing this problem, then, and this is the way to fix it, this is an easy fix. And let's not have this cause a bigger problem in our marriage. Wow. So it was a really easy sacrifice.
Wow. And see, we never even talked about The Walking Dead. I think you brought it up once as like your favorite show, but it wasn't like you were even like, hey, do you want to watch this with me? And I said no. I have no problem with zombie movies. I used to like them. I used to love like World War Z. But you know, and then God just convicted me. He's like, you're actually opening doors here. So for me, I'm just like, there's nothing wrong with them. Just for me, I'm like, oh, they open doors to something I don't want to be open to. So yeah, there's a lot of sacrifice. There's been a lot of putting others ahead of it, the other person ahead of yourself. But I love how you did that. I never realized spiritual covering could work like that. Like that what you did could actually affect my life. And the more I speak to men who are married, the more I speak to families. You know, I remember one leader said, you know, if I went and masturbated and watched porn, and then I went back to my family and they never knew, I never told them, but they would go from having so much unity and being so happy that, and I'd come back into the house and there'd be just discord, like there'd be like chaos in the house. And he was like, wow, I opened something in the umbrella, I opened something in the covering and let it through. And he's like, and then if I didn't do it, it would be so harmonious in the house. And he could actually tell the difference. And that they never knew that he was doing this. I think he kept it a secret for like 10 to 15 years. But it was something that, you know, the Lord really worked on him with. Okay, cool. So we talked about expectations that were, you know, we've told you about like the real raw, kind of harder side of things, just to give you an accurate glimpse into what's going on with us. But let's talk about the good stuff. Like how, honestly, marriage is incredible. I love being married. And I always say to people, I thoroughly recommend it. I love getting to wake up next to this man every day. You are so cute when you sleep. Actually, usually you wake up before me and then you try and stroke me and I get mad because it's too early.
Let's stroke my... rub your back.
He strokes my back. He rubs my back. Sorry. Does that mean something bad in America?
Yeah, it can.
Oh, okay. Sorry. He strokes my back, or he like he rubs my back. Sorry, apparently I'm being rude. Don't even notice it. He like strokes. Oh damn! I can't. Darn. That's also these are not bad words in Australia. Darn. I cannot think of another word. He rubs my back. When I wake up, and I get to wake up to him, and I love the fact that you want to provide for our family so much. Like, and when I say family, I mean you and I. I'm not pregnant or anything, guys. Don't worry. Now announcing on the Agape podcast. No, kidding. I would not do that.
Congratulations.
Mom
and Dad, you're going to be grandma and grandpa.
Yeah,
no, not really.
Letting you know. Here, you heard it here first. No. But like our family, the two of us, the Chamberlain family, like Nick, I knew before we got married, and that's one of the reasons I knew I could always count on him. I said, like, this man will look after me for the rest of my life. And if anything ever happens, he would always be willing to work. And so, like, Nick every day goes to work and he works so diligently. He comes home just destroyed after a hard day's work. And it's pretty tough manual labor. And so I'm like, oh, to see a man that, like, would work that hard for me, like, is like, I will provide for you. I will look after you back. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And I'm probably more old-fashioned in that. Like, I'm like, oh, I love it. Like, I can totally look after myself and I totally have my own funds and stuff. But having somebody who wants to do that is so incredible, because I feel like my whole life I've always had to be independent. I've always traveled on my own. I've worked. I started working at 14. I moved out of my parents' home at 16. I've always had to provide and like kind of survive. And so to have somebody else say, hey, I want to come alongside you and let's do this as a team, is so incredible. And then obviously I love sexy time. I love me some sexy time. We have a lot of fun together, and our friendship is now translated into a more intimate form of love, which is really cool. Oh, I should have also said, guys, we struggled a lot in our purity in dating as well. Or like in engagement. Sorry, engagement was super tough. Like I've had a boyfriend before, Nick, where we were together for 6 months and we were like such purity that we have never seen. I was like, this is so, we didn't even kiss for like 3.5 months. With Nick, we really struggled, but we were super open about it. We talked to our mentors. I remember even setting up in front of my revival group at this school ministry that I'm a part of. There's like, I don't know, I think we have like 50 people in our revival group. And I was like, hey, I'm struggling with this. We brought community in, and we really let them walk with us through that. And we just want to be really honest with you guys. Like, we did not do that perfectly. We had to fight for our purity. We had to fight for, on our wedding night, like, we had not had sex before we got married, but we had to fight for that. It was crazy. Nick would come around me and I would be like so turned on. Like he would just look at me and I'd be like, I've never had anything like that before. And it was like crazy. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like, our bodies were like, oh my gosh. And so everyone we spoke to was like, this is a really good thing. If you guys had no sexual chemistry, like, we would think that you actually shouldn't get married. But like, the fact that you're struggling is not a bad thing. Now let's teach you how to manage that. And so it was great because there was no shame, no condemnation. We just repented and went, okay, what are we going to do differently? And thank you, Jesus, that you have given us the sex drive and we get to use it within the confines of marriage in a really good, pure, and holy way. And now, guys, I can totally tell you it was totally worth it, because the Lord blesses. And yeah, sex within marriage is incredible. And just intimacy, honestly, just laying in bed and being together and spending time together in that way is just such a blessing. Combining your life with someone is such a blessing. Having, be able to serve somebody and give and actually care and be like, oh, Nick loves to cook, but I actually get to look after him by cooking after a hard day's work so he doesn't have to. And I have to be thinking about this stuff, and honestly, I dropped the ball a little bit in the beginning. I was like, oh, I had this, what are you going to have for dinner? And I'm like, oh, he can cook and he's fine with it, but he's had a really long day and I'm kind of just made my own thing, not thinking about I've got to do something for the two of us. There's a lot of independence that has to come in together, but I really do love caring for each other and looking after one another and dreaming. How fun is dreaming together, babe?
Dreaming's great.
Dreaming's great. We have so many dreams about things we want to do and accomplish, and ministry, and singles. We have such a heart for singles, and Nick has such a heart for men, and I have such a heart for women, that we're let's dream about what we can create for these people. Because now that I'm married, I'm more enthusiastic about helping singles to get together than when I was single. When I was single. Because this is super fun, super great. And I keep telling people, if I knew what God had for me, I wouldn't have doubted his goodness. I wouldn't have doubted that he had a good plan for me. I wouldn't have thought that he was withholding something from me to be mean. And I really do believe that God's best is better than anything we could ever hope, dream, or imagine. And so I really believe that what we have in our marriage is already so much better than what I thought. Yes, it's difficult, but it is incredible. And so I really do believe that God's timing was perfect. All these years when I was God, where's my husband? Where's my husband? He was married. We're going to talk about that whole process another time, but I had to meet him at the right time. And God just really broke down a lot of those things around divorce, which, we'll talk about in another episode. But, he really did a work. But yeah, it's been incredible. Babe, what is unexpected things that you've loved about being married?
Unexpected things that I've loved about being married. I think you touched on it a little bit, but I think one of the biggest ones for me is in singleness and even in dating, you're pretty independent, and so you learn how to go from being independent to interdependent, where
you're not dependent, but I like that.
It's safe to rely on somebody. You don't feel like you have to do everything by yourself, and you get to this place where you want to do things for the other person. Sex is a great benefit. I think that's just a given.
Mm-hmm. That is a given. Yes.
Resolving conflict, or even having conflict, and being able to resolve it
and fight for one another.
Is something so different to me in this marriage than the last marriage. If we had conflict, we didn't talk about it. My job made it really easy. I worked out of town.
In your previous marriage, you're talking about that, yeah.
Yeah, my old job in my previous marriage made it easy. I worked out of town. And so it just made it really easy to avoid conflict. And so in my healing and in this marriage to Beck, learning that conflict isn't a bad thing. Conflict can be a really great thing. It can be a really great tool.
It brings us closer together usually.
Right, and it's doing it in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's even saying, hey, I need 5 minutes. I need to go take a walk around the block and process, and then I'll be back, which has happened.
Yeah.
And so, and just as easy as it is to get into complacency, having somebody around every day, having your person around every day is amazing.
Yeah.
It is, for me, I think it's the best thing about being married, is just knowing that like Beck's gonna be here.
I'm gonna be home when you get home.
Right.
Yeah.
Is super awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So those are the things for me.
Yeah, that's so true. I love being like, oh, we're together. Like I went on a mission trip last week for a week, and I actually missed Nick when he was gone. I was like, oh, my baby. Oh, when I was gone, sorry, you were here. And I don't even miss my family. Oh, Nick's just piecing out. He needs to go and get some water. But I don't even miss my family when I'm gone for years sometimes. And I just missed him, and I was like, my person. Oh, he's gone. Where did he go? Or where did I go? And apparently I get a little confused when I'm traveling. But yeah, it is such a blessing to have your person there all the time. And like we said, sometimes we take each other for granted, but I love being able to walk out and be like, want to play a game? Want to do this? And at the end of the night, we don't have to go our separate ways. We don't have to have a curfew. We can just be together. He doesn't have to drive me home. And Nick always used to drive me home if I was tired, or he would always at least walk me to the car, open my door for me. He still opens the door for me every time we get in the car, and just looks after me and cherishes me so well, and just hears the Lord. And hey, what should we do? Even today, financially, we were like, oh, how are we going to do this? And something came up, and I thought, oh, I really want to give into this. I really want to sow into this. He came and gave me his phone with his cash app and said, here, ask the Lord how much to send, and send that amount, and I promise I'll be okay with it. And I was like, oh, wow, I just so appreciate how he hears the voice of the Lord. He's choosing to trust God in every area, including finances, which I know is a little bit hard sometimes, but just showing up and going, you know what, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, and we are going to work through this together. I'm your person. And then having somebody in your corner going, that's amazing, babe. What are we going to do next? Like, yes, let's do that. Yes, let's do that. It's just such a gift. So yeah, I really recommend getting married. And that's why now we are so passionate about helping singles to find their people, and to just really thrive as they do it. Like, we were both pretty healthy when we met, in the sense of like, you know what, we'd healed a lot of the things in our hearts. So I don't feel like we're very dependent upon one another. He goes and does his thing. I go and do my thing. We haven't had a lot of really big things come up. It's just those little foxes that come into the garden, that we've kind of had to deal with and navigate. And okay, how are we going to fix this? How do we work on our communication? And so even if you're the healthiest person ever, there's still going to be things that come up, obviously. But I love the idea, and I think it's so valuable to work on your heart, work on your stuff, get healing for the past, and then walk in as healthy as possible to your marriage, because it's going to help safeguard it. It's going to put out a lot of fires before they even start. So yeah, I can't wait. Nick has had to leave, unfortunately. But next time we are definitely going to talk some more. We are going to go through Nick's divorce story. It's incredible just what the Lord brought him through with that. And I'm really excited to share it. I personally never thought I was going to ever date somebody who's been divorced, let alone marry them. I remember back in the day just being like, nope, that's a definite no for me. And I think that was personally for me just being naive. And then when I saw somebody, when it became a person, not a story or a marital status on a dating site, for instance, divorced, when it says that, it became an actual person in front of me who I adored. That all just really changed, and God just really spoke to me about it. And then when I heard his story and what had happened, I was just like, wow, okay, I definitely will not hold this against you at all. So yeah, I'm really excited to share that and give hope to people who are divorced. And if you're watching this, sorry, I'm obviously not watching this, but listening to this, just to give you hope for the future and the amazing destiny that the Lord has for you. Because I really do believe that He is so good. I'm just feeling the presence right now, just completely enveloping me. But I hope this has brought you some hope. I hope that you feel encouraged, but also we brought you into the real and the raw. And you know what? It's not always pretty, but we want to be really honest with you guys. And so, yeah, I hope this has breathed life and a bit of reality into, you know what? Yeah, the Lord told me this and it's great. And we're going to be happy forever. Oh, and I think a really good distinction is, you know what? Just because the Lord said it doesn't mean that it's going to be all easy. And just because it's not easy doesn't mean it wasn't the Lord. A lot of us go, yeah, the Lord spoke something, we're all in. And then as soon as it gets hard, you know what? Actually don't think it was Jesus. And we bail. And I'm like, oh, wow, if only we trusted him more. Just because something's hard. Man, see what the apostles went through. See what Paul went through. The persecution and the suffering, and even the suffering that we're promised. But it actually produces character and perseverance within us. And I think it's a really good thing. But we tend to shy away from it because we don't want the painful road. We want the easy road because it feels a lot better, right? But I can honestly say marriage is so incredible. And any married person you meet will probably say, you know what, it's work, but nothing worthwhile is easy. And so I promise you, it is so worth it. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it there because I could just keep rambling. But you guys are amazing, and I totally believe that God has an amazing person for you. So I just want to pray for you, Lord. I just thank you for every listener. Lord, I thank you that you have prepared their paths and they have an incredible destiny. And today, I just pray for perseverance, Lord, perseverance for the dream in their heart to be married. Lord, perseverance through the things they might be suffering with in their singleness, Lord. I pray an increase of perseverance, Father, to have the faith to continue to contend for their husband or wife, Lord. And I just pray that you'll speak to them and continue to speak to them about the person that you have for them. And I ask this in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.